RTN News at 10 with Julia Somerville.
Aitken defiant as sleaze claims intensify. Angry Major accuses Blair of gutter tactics. Why a judge wants to see a cabinet minister in court. And how you stand to lose pounds from your pocket. Good evening. The government reacted furiously today to more allegations of sleaze against another minister. Mr. Major accused the Labour leader Tony Blair of stepping down into the gutter of public life with his questions. A few minutes earlier, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Jonathan Aitken, had stood up in the Commons to deny what he called a scurrilous newspaper report about a stay he'd had at Mohammed Al Fayed's Ritz Hotel in Paris. Downing Street said Mr. Aitken had the Prime Minister's full confidence, absolutely. Our political editor, Michael Brunson, reports on another extraordinary day at Westminster.
It was as though the photographers and the journalists were not there. Jonathan Aitken simply stepped past them all this morning, asking to be let through to his car, which was then driven off at some considerable speed. But after the meeting of Cabinet, there were Treasury questions in the House this afternoon, and the Shadow Chancellor Gordon Brown came straight to the point.
Will the Chief Secretary now take the opportunity to tell us that at no time was any part of his hotel bill last year in the Ritz Hotel in Paris paid for by a Mr. Ayaz? Will he answer the question?
The Speaker ruled Mr. Brown out of order, but Mr. Aitken said he wanted to set the record straight in any case.
Yes, I completely deny the allegation he has made, and I hope that this House, which is a very fair-minded place, will accept both my assurance and the Cabinet Secretary's assurance, and really to put an end to this hysterical atmosphere of sleaze journalism by The Guardian.
Later, the Prime Minister drove to the House to face questions from Tony Blair, not just about Mr. Aitken, but about the earlier resignations of Tim Smith and Neil Hamilton. A furious exchange began quietly enough.
What is the basis upon which he decides to retain or dismiss his government ministers? The truth of the allegations or merely the number of them?
Well, I had not expected to see him step down into the gutters of public life quite so speedily. And the right honourable gentleman should be ashamed of using the privilege of this House to raise those matters in this way.
Nobody on this side is saying whether these allegations are true or false, merely that they should be investigated. Why won't he allow that to happen in public?
So the right honourable gentleman says that the matters may not be true. If this is to be the new clean politics, Madam Speaker, let us have the old dirty politics from Labour we've been used to.
Well, that last remark seemed to many MPs, including plenty of Tories, to be uncharacteristically over the top. But the House of Commons is in a bitter mood just now. Later, for example, Tory MP Alan Duncan rose to make allegations about the leader of the opposition and his wife's legal work, angrily denounced as pathetic fiction by Labour. And later, Labour's trade spokesman Brian Wilson raised what he called the very serious matter of Conservative Vice Chairman Dame Angela Rumbold, who's resigned tonight as a director of a political lobbying company. The atmosphere tonight in and around the House of Commons is pretty poisonous. I don't need all this, said one member of the Cabinet despairingly to me tonight. It makes you wonder what we're all here for. And the mood hasn't exactly been improved by the continuing onslaught from the Harrods chairman Mohammed Al Fayed. This is his latest fax. And after some potentially libelous remarks about today's events, he goes on to say that the Cabinet Secretary should have gone to him in his search for the truth. Michael Brunson, News at 10, Westminster.
Well, what are the allegations about Mr. Aitken's bill for a stay at the Ritz? And what other questions raised by more than a week of sleaze stories are still unanswered? Here's our political correspondent, Hugh Pym.
Once again, the Ritz Hotel in Paris is at the centre of allegations. Last week concerning Neil Hamilton, now with claims that Jonathan Aitken stayed at the hotel last year when he was a Defence Procurement Minister. Mr. Aitken, leaving home this morning, has confirmed he was one of the 4 ministers interviewed by the Cabinet Secretary. He denied doing anything improper. But the Guardian newspaper claimed to have evidence from the Ritz that part of Mr. Aitken's bill may have been paid by someone else. They said they twice passed on information to the Cabinet Secretary, most recently yesterday. And today, the Cabinet Secretary, Sir Robin Butler, wrote to the Guardian editor saying, "We sucked this orange dry in our correspondence earlier in the year. For the record, I don't regard Jonathan Aitken as having lied to me or misled me. But while attention may be focused on Jonathan Aitken, tonight there are still questions being asked around Westminster about the string of allegations which began to emerge a week ago and which led to the resignations of Tim Smith and Neil Hamilton. Who, for example, was the intermediary who met the Prime Minister to relay information? Several newspapers have speculated it was Brian Hitchin, editor of the Sunday Express. What was the arrangement referred to by the Prime Minister between himself and Mohammed Al-Fayed? Mr Major says he wanted a critical report on his takeover of House of Fraser withdrawn. And what were the allegations which tipped the balance against Mr Hamilton? He was associated with a company called Plateau Mining, a spin-off from a consultancy firm which in turn had links with another company examined by the Serious Fraud Office. It seems a tenuous link, and Neil Hamilton's father is so angry that he's quitting the Conservative Party.
Everyone says there is no problem, that he isn't involved, yet the Prime Minister comes along and suddenly, after supporting him for all the last week, suddenly turns around and arranges for his dismissal.
As for Mr Aitken, most Tory MPs feel he's secure. One suggestion is that someone mistakenly paid the wrong hotel bill at the Ritz. QPIM News at 10, Westminster.
There were more handshakes but no peace treaties today when President Clinton went to Syria. He was the first American leader to do so for 20 years. Mr Clinton held talks with President Assad, whose country is still officially at war with Israel. Tonight he returned to Jerusalem to tell the Israeli parliament that the Syrians definitely want to make peace, but there's a lot of hard bargaining to be done. We'll dive now to our Middle East correspondent Robert Moore in Jerusalem.
Tonight, President Bill Clinton is in Jerusalem, the historic and divided city that both Palestinians and Jews regard as their capital. But earlier today, in the most significant part of his visit, he was in Damascus, talking peace with Israel's traditional enemy, President Assad. It was a visit full of political risk. An American president in a country that Washington says still sponsors terrorism. But the potential prize is dazzling. If Assad signed a peace deal, then Lebanon would follow, and Israel would finally be at peace with all its neighbors. And President Assad, so long the bitter enemy of the Jewish state, the very symbol of Arab opposition to compromise, did appear more flexible, more willing to join the momentum towards peace. He said he had a simple goal.
To transform the region from a state of war to a state of peace, ends occupation, saves the blood of the innocent.
And President Clinton, who has vowed not to rest until he has brokered a Syrian-Israeli peace, said he was encouraged.
I don't believe we will finish the job on this visit. I do know we have made some progress here, and I expect to make some progress in Israel.
So from Damascus to Jerusalem, it was a short flight but crosses a great political barrier. President Clinton is now negotiating on a deal that would involve Israel returning the Golan Heights to Syria in exchange for that elusive peace treaty. Mr. Clinton is now in the Holy City, but has offended Palestinians by only meeting with Jewish leaders. So delicate is the balance here, he cancelled his tour of Jerusalem, leaving his wife to visit the Wailing Wall, the site so precious to Jews that lies in the heart of the Old City. The president tonight took his message to Israel's parliament, the Knesset, with hard words for the enemies of peace.
You are the past, not the future. The peacemakers are the future.
As Clinton told Israelis tonight, the circle of your enemies is shrinking. But with all the hope, there remains the lingering fear of more extremist violence. And despite the triumph of the deal with Jordan and the hopes raised by Syria, a comprehensive peace deal still requires much hard work. Can Syria and Israel now make the historic compromise needed? This is Robert Moore reporting live for News at 10 from Jerusalem.
A judge today threatened to order the Health Secretary, Virginia Bottomley, to appear at the Old Bailey to explain why no secure hospital place could be found for a mentally impaired prisoner. He said the prisoner needed it, the public needed it for their protection, and it was outrageous that the resources weren't there to provide it. Colin Baker reports.
For 2 terrifying days, the 8-year-old son of a neighbour was held captive in this airing cupboard without food and water.
The boy's captor was this man, 34-year-old Stephen Hart, a cleaner with a previous conviction for abducting a child. Hart had kept the boy at his home on this estate in East London. The judge said he should be held in a secure hospital, but there were no hospital places. Judge Bruce Laughland said, "I am scandalised by what I have been told. If I issue an open invitation to the Secretary of State to appear before me to explain the situation, then something may be done." Hart has been held in Brixton Prison since February this year, but the judge said he was a man who needed secure care, the public needed protection, and the situation was outrageous. Campaigners for those suffering mental disorders applauded the judge.
I'd say, go on, get her into court, because it will be the first time that the country will really learn what the government's policy is about the closure of beds and community care policy.
To get Mrs. Bottomley into court, the judge said he would take whatever steps were in his power. He postponed sentence for 2 weeks. A short time ago, the Department of Health said that they hoped to find a place for Hart within a few days.
The Foreign Office is still trying to confirm reports that the British hostage Mark Slater and his 2 companions were killed in Cambodia just as they were about to be freed. A Cambodian who translated for them after they were kidnapped by the Khmer Rouge in July said today they died in a mortar attack by government forces. Our Asia correspondent Caroline Kerr has just sent this report by satellite from Cambodia.
At the mountain base where the 3 were held, there is no shrine to them tonight, only a collection of weapons. The Khmer Rouge guerrillas who captured the hostages given up their arms in defeat, but for 3 Westerners, their surrender comes too late. A government officer at the site said his men hadn't started searching for bodies yet, but all the reports he'd heard suggested the hostages were dead. On July the 26th, Mark Slater and his 2 friends boarded this train to the seaside town of Sihanoukville. Today it's running normally again. On that day, taking a train journey proved a fatal mistake. The train was ambushed by rebel fighters and the 3 Westerners on board were captured. The next time Mark and his friends were seen, they were pleading for their lives at the Khmer Rouge camp. The young warehouse man who'd taken a year off work to see the world had become caught up in a civil war. Tonight, Commander Pett, the Khmer Rouge officer who's believed to be responsible for the death of Mark Slater and his companions, is reported to be on the run and to have escaped government capture. It's a major embarrassment for the government troops, and perhaps explains why at the very highest level the government is still denying that the hostages are dead.
I, as Prime Minister, I don't have any information telling me that those hostages are dead.
The fact is, until the bodies of the hostages are found and identified, the uncertainty continues. And the agony of not knowing goes on for the families left behind. Caroline Kerr, News at 10, on 10.
And sorry about the poor sound quality on that satellite report. The Royal Mint offered to relieve us of some of our change today. 1 and 2 pence coins could be taken right out of circulation. There could be a new £2 coin and a lighter, smaller and rounder 50p piece. ITN's Robin White weighed up the changes.
After 4 changes in the past 12 years, the Royal Mint is once again thinking of ways of altering our money. These are their ideas for the future: 2 alternatives for a £2 coin, and above an old 50p piece, 2 versions of a smaller, lighter one.
We're not only consulting the general public, but the banks, retailers, vending industry, special groups like the blind. We want to get people's views.
And those views today were?
A bit light, isn't it?
A bit light. The size is about right.
What about the new possibilities for the 50p?
No, definitely not. They're too similar, aren't they? It's nearly the same size as a 10p piece.
I prefer notes myself.
So how much difference would the new coins make in your pocket? Together, all the new lightweight decimal coins available now, adding up to £2.85, weigh 35 grams. But to carry the same amount 10 years ago would have weighed your pocket down by 72 grams. That's double the new lightweight coins. Some dealers see money laundering as the future.
I think that we will eventually end up with plastic notes. They're harder to counterfeit. They're more durable. You could literally take this note and wash it.
Over the years, the public has had to get used to changes from the Royal Mint with decimalisation, the 50p piece, 20p piece and £1 coins. If the Chancellor approves, the new money could be on the streets by 1997. Robin White, News at 10, Central London.
The government campaign to get all school children vaccinated against measles and German measles, rubella, ran into more opposition today. Another Roman Catholic public school, Stonyhurst College, said it wouldn't offer its boys the rubella vaccine because it's derived from cells from an aborted fetus. And other people have raised more practical objections. Here's our health correspondent, Anya Sitaram.
Most children can't see the benefits, but the decision by a second Catholic school not to give the jab shows many adults are in doubt. It's not just moral qualms. Some parents say the government is ignoring potential risks. Jackie Fletcher says her 3-year-old is proof of the dangers. She believes he was brain damaged by the combined measles, mumps and rubella jab. But the Walder family say their daughter was born blind and brain damaged after Mrs. Walder got German measles during pregnancy because she hadn't been immunised. The number of deaths from measles has fallen consistently. In 1940 there were 1,000 deaths. That figure fell to 90 deaths in 1968 when vaccinations were introduced. A further decline continued until 1990 when just one person died. The government says this is evidence that vaccines work. But skeptics say the imminent epidemic shows they don't.
The vast majority of children go through measles without serious consequences. And the benefits to their health in the long run are something that the Department of Health has not even looked into.
There are a group of children who haven't been vaccinated in the past, and already if you went round schools in England and did schools in Scotland, you would find that measles is there, and it's not a mild disease.
Most doctors agree with Kenneth Cowman, but the decision by a second school and a number of parents not to consent is a setback to the government's plans.
Anya Sitaram reporting. The Russian government admitted today that the Arctic oil spill could have serious environmental consequences. Harsh weather is hampering efforts to investigate the extent of the leak. Russian officials are sticking to their estimate that 14,000 tons has been spilt. An American company has said the amount could be 20 times bigger. Adrian and Bernadette Mooney, the British couple found guilty of trying to smuggle a baby out of Romania, were today told their appeal will be heard in 2 weeks' time. They're currently on bail. They were sentenced to 28 months in jail earlier this month. And the legal battle for the Three Graces was settled once and for all today. 3 judges rejected a last-ditch appeal by the Getty Museum that could have let them take the statue to America. The British Museum can now make an offer for it. In tonight's special report, we return to allegations of political corruption, not here but in Moscow. It involves the misappropriation of huge sums of money and equipment from the Russian army. The Defense Minister, Pavel Grachov, has been linked to the scandal and to the murder of a reporter investigating the allegations. As our Moscow correspondent Julian Mannion explains, his death has outraged his friends, colleagues and the Russian public.
Ordinary Russians turned out in hundreds for the funeral of a young journalist. His violent murder has suddenly become the focus of a wave of national disgust at the corruption now engulfing public life. The 27-year-old reporter Dmitry Kholodov had written a series of articles alleging corruption in the highest levels of the Ministry of Defense and pointing the finger at the Defense Minister himself. Then on Monday last week, Kholodov received a telephone call which brought him to the Kazansky railway station in central Moscow. Kholodov had been told that he would find important documents in a case in the left luggage department. He collected the briefcase and took it to his office, but the case contained a bomb. Kholodov died in a powerful blast which ripped apart the headquarters of his newspaper, Moskovsky Komsomolets. When they recovered from shock and grief, his fellow journalists accused Ministry of Defense officials of complicity in the attack.
This bomb was intended to destroy the truth and freedom of speech. It's frightening. If the people who committed this crime are not punished, they will kill other journalists who are trying to report on corruption in this country.
The articles which may have caused Kholodov's death are now on display. They allege that Russian defense chiefs have made massive illegal profits by selling equipment from the Western Army Group, which recently withdrew from Germany. Whole trainloads of military property are said to have disappeared into a Russian Bermuda Triangle. Guns have allegedly been sold to the warring parties in Bosnia. The Defense Minister, Pavel Grachev, is accused of profiting from the deals. And earlier this year, he showed his anger in an unbroadcast section of a TV talk show when he referred to Kholodov as an enemy. But Grachev has since denied any involvement either in corruption or in Kholodov's murder. There is clear evidence that the withdrawal of the once feared Army Group West from Germany has led to serious abuses. This week, Aitken found a wing of 54 assault helicopters parked next to an abandoned airfield near Moscow. As winter starts, the crews are sleeping in their aircraft. They had been promised new housing in Russia, but the allocated funds have apparently disappeared. At Dmitry Kholodov's grave, his friends and colleagues remember him in the traditional manner with a vodka toast. The new Russia has bred few heroes, but the fatal end of Kholodov's battle against corruption has won him broad respect. It has also sent shockwaves through Moscow's political establishment. The Defense Minister, Pavel Grachev, is extending a tour of the Far East, apparently in the hope that the row will die down while he is away. Meanwhile, Boris Yeltsin's government says it is mounting a massive investigation to try to find Kholodov's killers. Julian Mannion, News at 10, Moscow.
Price of seeking the truth behind corruption scandals, Russian style. And finally, back to the Middle East. There's been a lot of talk this week about peace and hope for the future. A tangible example can be found in Lebanon. Its civil war ended 4 years ago, and now its people are embarking on a multi-million-pound rebuilding program to heal their scars. From Beirut, ITN's Mark Webster reports.
Beirut's desperate to regain its role as the playground of the Middle East. But after years as its battlefield, the only guests at the Hotel Saint-Georges, once the city's finest, are non-paying Syrian soldiers living in the ruins. Change is coming. 4 years after a civil war which made Beirut synonymous with bloodshed and mayhem, more than 1,000 battle-scarred buildings are being demolished to make way for a new city centre.
There are plans for once. I mean, this country boomed out of nothing in the 50s and the 60s, you see. No one planned anything in Lebanon before.
This is the planner's dream, a controversial multi-billion-pound redevelopment to replace bomb craters with buildings. It doesn't impress Beirut residents like Leila Alami, who lives in her bombed-out house with 3 children and no sanitation. She hates the past and fears for her family's future. But the Lebanese hope it will attract more tourists to sites like the Roman temples in Baalbek.
My normal holiday is going deer hunting in the wintertime.
How does this compare with deer hunting in the wintertime then?
It's a lot better.
The brooding presence of Hezbollah militants in the hills above means the Lebanon's calm beauty will remain troubled. Mark Webster, News at 10, Baalbek.
And that's News at 10. Till tomorrow night, good night.
Hello, good evening. Well, our weather remains in rather unsettled mood with a showery day today, and tomorrow, well, some sunshine for most of us and 1 or 2 showers as well, but not as many showers as today. And as we head into the weekend, well, I'm afraid it's all downhill with bands of rain rapidly rushing across the country, so keep those umbrellas handy. Here's what's happening. The old low pressure that's kept us showery up there to the north of Scotland, that's drifting away now. It'll take some of its showers with it. The next area of cloud and rain associated with this low, that'll be pushing towards us on Saturday. That's well into the future. Let's come back to tomorrow and the best of the dry, bright weather in the more sheltered spots, eastern Scotland, eastern England, central and southern parts of both England and Wales, and the sheltered parts of Northern Ireland too. Yes, you may see the odd shower in these areas, but the bulk of the showers will stretch from about northwest England up the western side of Scotland, and some quite heavy ones too for a time there in Shetland. And then late in the day, well, the beginnings of The weekend's rain turning up in Northern Ireland by about sunset. Temperatures tomorrow, well, these are pretty much what we saw today, but with less in the way of wind, it won't feel quite so chilly.
Good evening, I'm Nick Clark. This is London Tonight. First tonight, an Old Bailey judge has threatened to have Health Secretary Virginia Bottomley brought to court to explain the lack of secure hospital places. He was speaking during the trial of a mentally handicapped man charged with locking an 8-year-old boy in a cupboard for 2 days without food and water. Our political correspondent Paul Laughland reports.
For 2 days, a terrified 8-year-old boy was held captive in this stifling airing cupboard in a house on an estate in Wapping. He was given no food or water and had to survive in an area less than 4 feet square. The little boy's home and his frantic family were only yards away from his prison. He was found still locked up as police carried out a house-to-house search. Today, the man who incarcerated him, Stephen Hart, a 34-year-old cleaner, appeared at the Old Bailey, accused of abduction and false imprisonment. Hart was described as a child in an adult body. The court heard he had a previous conviction for abduction. The judge, Bruce Laughland, said he had encountered care in the community cases like this before, where a person went on to murder. He said it was very important for the safety of children that Hart be contained. Judge Laughland wanted to send him to a secure hospital unit, but was told that none were available. And that's when the judge got angry. "I am scandalised by what I have been told," he said. "Unless the problem is sorted out within 2 weeks, I shall require the attendance of Virginia Bottomley, the Secretary of State for Health, to explain it to me." The Department of Health responded with a statement saying there appears to be no requirement in health legislation for the Secretary of State to attend the court, though the judge could ask the Regional Health Authority for an explanation. At the Old Bailey, this is Paul Laughland for London Tonight.
A vice chairman of the Conservative Party has resigned from the board of a political lobbying company after a newspaper article about its work over stations on the Channel Tunnel rail link. Dame Angela Rumbold, who represents Mitcham and Morden, had already declared her work for the company in the register of MPs' interests. The firm, Decision Makers, had lobbied for Ebbsfleet in Kent to be chosen as an intermediate rail station rather than Stratford in East London. An artist's impression of the professional hitman who killed 2 men in South London was released today. He's white, in his mid-20s, and about 5 feet 10 inches tall. At the time of the murders, he wore a green jacket, red baseball cap, jeans and trainers. The killer shot the 2 men dead as they left a pub in Balham last week. Detectives have described it as a professional gangland execution. His victims were 59-year-old Michael McCormack and 34-year-old John Ogden. Police say they've no reason to believe either man was involved in any crime.